Good afternoon, I'm Tom at Ledgemere, and this afternoon I want to take a few minutes and just go over some pretty common animals that you might want to have on your homestead or small family farm. And for this conversation, we're not going to talk about animals that are pets or really don't contribute much to a farm. And so we're not talking about hobby farms, we're not talking about like a petting zoo or anything of that nature. We're talking about a self-sustaining small family farm or a homestead where the animals that you have carry their own weight and contribute to the overall welfare and success of your farm. And we're not talking about emotional support animals or I wanted this because it's cool. I'm just talking about animals that I believe as a farmer are worth keeping. So let's start there. So one thing before we even start is I recommend that you buy at least one book, and this book right here is one of my favorites, and it's put out by the Story Publishing Company, S-T-O-R-E-Y, and I'm not affiliated with Stories. I'm just telling you, it's a great book. And whenever I would buy an animal or I'd look into getting a new animal, I always bought a book about it and I read about it. I researched the heck out of it, and then I made my choice to go ahead and get that animal. I didn't just be like, oh, you know what, I think a camel would be great, I'm gonna go buy a camel. No, trust me. All right, we're talking about farming, we're talking about homesteads, we're not talking about an animal park here. We're talking about I need to sustain my family, and so we'll just stick with the theme here. So going forward, we're going to start with the gateway drug. So chickens are typically what most people will get when they first become a homesteader, and chickens are great. They're very easy to take care of. They don't require a lot of infrastructure. The chickens really don't care what their house looks like as long as it's out of the elements and predator proof. That said, you can build something elaborate, but keep in mind, we don't want to spend a ton of money on a chicken Taj Mahal for 6 chickens that give us half a dozen eggs a week. You won't live long enough to recoup that cost. So we're not talking about pets. We're talking about I'm starting a little homestead. I'm talking about a small family farm. So your best bet with like a chicken house is to use an existing structure. Sometimes you can tear something down. Sometimes you can get cheap lumber, pallets, whatever. So anyway, the gateway drug, chickens, they're very easy to take care of. You typically have 2 types of chickens. You've got the meat birds and your egg laying birds. They've got dual purpose birds. They've got the fancy birds. They've got a million different types of birds. When Darwin took an inventory in 1875 or something of the world's chicken population, I think there was 13 different types, and now there's, I don't even know, hundreds. When you go to a feed store or a typical place like that, you're going to find maybe a half dozen, 10 tops, different breeds of birds. A lot of these are like the standard, like the Buff Orpington, the Rhode Island Red, Barred Rock, New Hampshire Red, things like that, Golden Lace Wyandotte. These are all the Leghorn. These are all your birds that are time proven. They are bought consistently, they lay consistently, and they have a great reputation for being, in the Northeast, they typically are going to find at your feed store birds that are able to survive the cold. The Leghorns, they sell them up here, and they tend to get a little bit more frostbitten because of their wattle, and their combs are a little bit longer, they flop over. I haven't had that problem really, but anyway, the gist of the conversation I'm trying to convey to you is when you are getting birds, your first birds for your homestead, stick with a pretty common breed, one that is known and established a reputation of being, a well-bred animal. And so the gold standard for birds is you get 1 bird for every member of your household plus, say, 2 extra. So you add, like, say you have a household of 4, you have 4 people, then you add 50%, so you get 6. And so that'll give you about a half dozen eggs a week. When it's cold, it may taper back a little bit. You might get 3, 4. It just depends. I've got other videos about how to deal with the cold, but chickens are a great animal to have. And again, I would start with the most common breeds that are out there. You'll find them readily accessible and easy to purchase. dual purpose birds. They lay well, and I've harvested them before for meat. They're not as heavy. They're flavorful, but they take a little longer to grow out. So they're not really worth it per se for meat harvesting. What I'll typically do is when I have meat birds go, if I have any roosters that are kind of young, I'll send them along with it and just get rid of them, because I don't want to keep extra roosters that don't really contribute to the farm. So when we talk about meat birds, we want to stay with pretty much the gold standard of meat birds, which is the X-Rock, the Cornish cross, the big white chicken. And so the reason that we typically want to stay with that kind of bird is it's going to taste pretty similar to what you're used to, what you've experienced. And like Joel Salatin said, people will only accept just a little bit of weirdness. So if you're raising your own chicken, people aren't used to chicken that was raised in the backyard, and then so if you add say a Ranger or some other kosher king or something, you've two-stepped out. So those birds tend to be a little tougher. They tend to taste a little gamier. They're not the gold standard. They're not what you're used to. So the white rocks, the Cornish rocks, they're great. And I've done all the math. I've done experiments where I've gotten the koshers and the Rangers, and they take longer to grow out. They don't get as big. They cost more money because you've kept them longer. It still costs the same amount of money to butcher them and bag them, and you're getting back 75% of the amount of meat that you would have had on a Cornish rock, and then you add 25% longer minimum to raise it out. So it's just not worth it. And I get it. I know some of you are going to be like, oh, I want to do this. I want to try that. And I understand, because I've done it too. I'm just telling you from experience, the birds that you keep 7 or 8 weeks, the white rocks, versus the birds you keep 12, 13, 14 weeks, when you start doing the math and figure out the feed conversion, and then you figure out the taste of it and the toughness of the meat, etc., it's not worth it. And that's in my mind. And typically you're going to find that most of the farmers markets, they're not going to sell a weird version of bird. You're going to get the Cornish rock, you're going to get the big plump broiler chicken. So once you get set up for chickens, it's easy to jump across to more different types of poultry, like turkeys. And I've raised turkeys with chickens for a long time, and I've never had issues with blackhead or anything else. And I'm not going to say that that's not ever going to be an issue. I'm just saying I've never had that issue. And so I don't raise a crazy number of turkeys. I don't breed turkeys. Again, I stay with the gold standard, either the broad-breasted whites or the bronze. Get the poults early in the spring, and then I send them to the butcher in July, and they come back at the end of July. They go in the freezer, and then we have 3, 4, up to 6 turkeys in the freezer ready for the holidays. And again, I understand you want to get the bourbon reds or the chocolates, and they're cool. The meat's not going to be as great. It's not going to be what you're used to. It's going to be more dark meat than white meat. And again, if you want to breed these animals, you've got another whole layer here that it's going to cost you a lot more money than you think, because you got to have the infrastructure. You got to feed and water these animals all winter, and so you're carrying this whole this whole infrastructure over the winter for animals that are giving you back nothing. And then in the spring, they'll lay some eggs. Maybe you can hatch them out, maybe you can't. There's a reason why the heritage breeds are going out of fad, and it's not because people don't like them. It's just because economically, it's not worth it. And so, like, we'll jump into the next thing, like ducks and geese. And I think ducks, like particularly the pecans, they make great layers. They're like the broiler bird for the duck kingdom. They're friendly, they dress out well, but you can't really find a butcher, particularly around here, who does waterfowl, because you're dealing with a different type of feathers, the down, and it's a whole different setup to harvest waterfowl than it is for chickens and turkeys. So unless you're planning on doing ducks and geese at your farm and harvesting them yourself, they're really not a great investment. I do keep usually around 2 ducks and a breeding pair of geese, and the reason being is that they keep all the slugs, snails, Japanese beetles, etc. out of my orchard, and they kind of weed the place out. And so they do carry their weight that way. They lay some eggs that we sell, and you know, we're talking a couple birds. We're not talking 30 birds. So they don't really eat a lot of grain in the summer because they're foraging, but it's kind of like cost neutral. There's really nothing coming back in. So, but they do have a purpose. They're weeding and getting rid of bugs. When I have an orchard, I don't want to spray it because we have bees, so I have to come up with something else to get rid of the insects. And so the geese and ducks, that's what they do in the summer for me. When we talk about processing birds, there's quite a bit involved with that. And I did have equipment to process my own birds, but I really decided that it's worth the $5 or $6 a bird to have the butcher do it, and it's already frozen. It doesn't make my freezer run for a week to you know, freeze all these birds. I don't have to worry about all the processing and everything else. It's just you know, it's too much time invested to process my own birds. It's worth the $5 or $6 a bird for the minimum amount of birds that I have. I'm not selling them, they're just sustaining for the family. So I really feel like cost effective and time management, it's really not worth it to process my own birds. And I have done it. It's an experience, but I will tell you that it's messy, it smells bad, you have to have a place to dispose of all the innards, which compost, they make great compost. But one of the biggest things is time management, time constraints, and the fact that it literally takes your freezer about a week of running solid for 30 birds to freeze. So not worth it in my mind. And so when we talk about processing birds for sale, there's another whole level of government bureaucracy that I don't want to get involved with. It's, you know, the same bureaucracy that prohibits you from selling raw milk from your farm, and it's just there's a lot of liability involved with that. So when you start talking about selling meat from the farm, there's a lot of government red tape that's going to get in the way. And so what I recommend is that you talk to your county extension office. Every county in the United States has an extension office. They have an agent, they have a person that you can talk to and find out what the rules and regulations are. The state of Maine, the University of Maine Extension, Cooperative Extension, they send out 1 million bulletins. You can find out anything you want to find. So one of the other animals that you might want to consider is rabbits. We tried rabbits, and I'm not a good rabbit person. The kids liked them as pets, but they were willing to let the rabbits go to the butcher. But the problem I had was I couldn't get the mother rabbits, the does, to successfully raise their young, or I think they're kits maybe. They couldn't. Basically, they would have baby bunnies and just leave them, and they would die. So after 2 or 3 tries with that, I just decided it wasn't worth it. Sold all the rabbit equipment and moved on with my life. I have plenty of people that I know that are wildly successful raising rabbits. They sell bunnies, they sell rabbit meat, they sell all the things. And if that's your niche and that's what you want to do, then. So honeybees, we got honeybees this year. My wife is very, very actively involved with her bees, and it looks like her hives are doing really well. They're thriving, and so a lifelong dream of my wife was to be a beekeeper, and so she got the hives, the suit, and all the equipment for Christmas. That was a Christmas gift. She's happy. We have an orchard, we have lots of wildflowers, we have pastures with clover. Our bees have pollen pants all the time, and so there's a lot to know about bees, and I will not pretend that I know anything because I am not the beekeeper. I can only tell you what I've read. My wife took a beekeeping class, and so bees are just a great addition to your farm. So in a nutshell, there's a lot of breeds of goats, just like with everything else. There are some that are okay, and some that are a lot less okay. And so in my mind, the Nubians and the Saanens are probably, if you're going to get goats, those are the 2 types of goats to get. Those 2 breeds of goats are not the opportunists that the other goats, particularly Nigerian dwarfs. And I'm sorry if you hate me, I hate Nigerian dwarfs with a passion. I'm going to tell you why about that too. So The Saanen milk is a little bit gamey. The Nubian milk is really creamy. It's tolerable. It's not really that bad. And Nubians they're good goats. Okay, they're okay. The Boer goats, they are friendly, but they tend to push on your fences. Well, all goats will do this, but they really are like tags to your fence. And so when you have a fence, if you decided that you're going to ignore my advice and you want to buy goats, build the strongest fence that you think you could build, and then add 50% stronger than that and higher. Because we tried goat sausage, we tried everything, and it was rank. So we didn't like it. We didn't like the smell of the bucks. We didn't like the little goats that were always out wrecking the place. They'll get on the hood of your car. My son and daughter had Nigerians, and then another one of my sons had a Nigerian. I gave away 2 of the Nigerians, and I'm not even kidding, you can't make this up. One of the goats, she went to my friend's house, saw her reflection in the door of his car, and proceeded to pound the crap out of the door of his car, and then went around the other side and did the same thing. And so those goats didn't last there long either. But baby goats are cute. They are the cutest thing. You know, they're cute. And so if you're going to ignore my advice and get goats, get Saanens or Nubians, because they are the least destructive. They're friendly. The milk tastes okay. They actually have a purpose in life besides ruining your property. And goats are browsers, so they tend to reach up more than graze. The advantage of goats over sheep to me escapes me, because I find that the sheep do the same thing the goats did without the menace behind it. So if you have an area of brush and stuff you want cleaned out, then get sheep. So that moves me to my next species, which is sheep. I love sheep. They eat brush, brambles, weeds, poison ivy. Land that is basically useless for anything else, you can put sheep on it and they'll thrive. They will not eat poisonous plants if they have other feed available, and even then they probably won't eat the poisonous plants, like lamb's ear. You know, I forget all the names of all the noxious weeds that are toxic to sheep, and there's some, but I don't have issues with that. And so the sheep eat the brush, brambles, sumac, poison ivy, all the junk that you want out. Just fence it and put the sheep. So sheep, like cows, have 4 stomachs, and their digestive system is capable of digesting the parts of vegetables that we can't, like the parts of corn. You know, we can't eat the stalk and the leaves, etc. The sheep will eat that and thank you for it. And so one of the things about sheep is I think they're great employees. You know, they're not going to sue me. They don't complain about the work. They don't complain about the hours. They do all the work around here as far as keeping the brush down, and I don't have to pay them anything except give them some treats and a little bit of attention. Sheep are typically docile. They may even be a little skittish of you. They're like really among the safest 4-legged animals out there. They're just great. The caveat to that is a ram, and you really don't even need to keep a ram if you want to raise sheep. You could buy you know, a ram lamb in the spring, and then keep them until after breeding season is done in the fall, and then send him to the butcher shop. He's done his business. The girls are pregnant, and he's gone to the butcher, so you've got meat. It's a perfect situation, and that's what I do every year. I get a new ram lamb every spring, keep him throughout the summer. He does his business with the girls in the fall, and then right afterwards goes to freezer camp. Sheep are susceptible to some worms, and unfortunately in modern agriculture we've created our own monster where we've just mass inoculated our animals. And so your best thing to do is, if you suspect that your sheep have worms, is to get a fecal and take it to the vet, and then go on the vet's advice on what to get or how to treat the worms. Don't just mass treat your sheep. And I've got other videos about sheep, and so I'm very passionate about sheep. I think they're great. I think they're probably, besides chickens, they're probably your top animal. So the next animal is hogs or pigs. I don't raise pigs here. We did it one year, and I did get a heritage breed breeding pair of pigs. They had their piglets. We kept them for a little while and then sent them to the butcher, processed them, and we have not had pigs since. and I'm going to explain to you why I don't have pigs. So when we start thinking about pigs, we always think of bacon or pork chops. Well, unfortunately, there's only just so many portions of pork chops and bacon on a hog. You've got roasts and ham and tenderloin and liver and everything else. So unless you're a big fan of all those pieces, you're kind of like, you're not going to get back a lot of meat that you're really going to like. And then, you know, some people will be like, I'm going to get a breeding pair of pigs and sell piglets, and I'll raise pigs. Well, keep in mind, so the gestation period, I think, for pigs, I think it's 3 months and 3 weeks and 3 days or something. I don't remember really. You probably have 2 litters of pigs a year, I guess. I'm not sure. But you got to feed the brood sow all year long. You got to feed a boar all year long. And then it's, I just don't want to feed animals all year that don't do anything really. You know, it gets me to my second most favorite animal, which is cattle. I feel like probably nobody loves cows more than I do. They're just I just love cows, right? So we raise Jersey steers, and I get them as day-old steers from a local dairy farm, and bring them home, give them some bottles, and then we raise them up for 1.5 years, almost 2 years, and send them, and then rinse and repeat. We just keep getting babies. And as much as I loved having dairy cows here, you know, and the cow breeding and having calves, just, you know, feeding a cow hay and grain all year for one calf and hope that nothing goes wrong, and you don't have to have the vet out here 3 or 4 times. And so as much as I love cows, you know, when you got several members of the family who are lactose intolerant, 8 gallons of milk a day from one cow is it's a lot. And even though I had people who wanted to buy raw milk from me, I can't really sell it. You know, I don't really want to sell things that people might get sick from. We don't have food sovereignty really here, and once you get sued for something in your life, you really just kind of don't want to take the risk. So I just have the calves now, and I do love milk cows. So if you've got a means to drink that kind of milk, if you've got a means to market that kind of milk, then you really should have to milk cows. But just remember, there's only so many hours in a day, and if you're like me and you're just one person, there's only so much you can do. And keep in mind also that while some animals, like birds, you can use the infrastructure for birds, and you can use the infrastructure from cows a lot of times for sheep. A lot of stuff doesn't really you know, crossover, and so every time you get into a species of livestock, you have to go get all the materials to sustain that, and then feed, veterinary bills, find a market for it. There's a lot of things involved that on the surface you don't really think about until you actually do it, and then you'll realize, oh geez, I've got a lot of stuff here, and I've got a lot of infrastructure, I've got a lot of money going out and a lot of money coming back in. So you really got to be cautious about what endeavors you embark upon. And my best piece of advice that I'm going to leave you with today is start small, dip your feet in the water, see if it's something you like, see if it's something you want to continue, and really evaluate your market before you start jumping into things, before you start increasing in volume of what you have. I have a great market for eggs. I have a great market for beef and lamb. Pork, it's, you know, I can't sell by the cut because I'm not licensed by the state. I don't go to a USDA inspected butcher shop. I go to a USDA exempt butcher shop, which means he's inspected, you know, but I can sell it by the quarter, by the half, by the whole, but I can't sell it by the cut. And so if you start selling by the cut, you can charge more, sure, but then you have to have a state inspected scale that gets inspected by the county maybe every year, or the state. And So just remember that even though some things on the surface may seem like I can make more money if I sell it by the cut, there's always something else, another level of bureaucracy and red tape that is prohibitive. And so make sure you research all those venues before you embark upon that. And even when you think you have, there's always going to be something that comes up that you didn't think about. So just be ready, because as a farmer, you have to be flexible. Everything is in flux all the time. All the time. If you are a person who can't live with chaos, you have no business being a farmer. And I'm being very blunt. I'm trying to be nice. But if you live a regimented life and you just can't handle chaos or unexpected, man, you have got you've got your work cut out for you. And having said that, do I love being a farmer? Absolutely. I love everything about it. I love being a plumber, an electrician, a veterinarian, a financier, a mechanic, a carpenter. That was me in the military, be a hard target, be chaotic, be ready for everything at a moment's notice that is unexpected. So yeah, that's me. Also, so there are other animals, like alpacas and horses and such, but I don't have any experience with alpacas other than I think they're cool. We're not spinners here, so I don't have any use for an alpaca. I guess some people eat them. I'm happy with beef and lamb, so I don't need to eat them. I had a horse when I was a kid growing up. I had a horse when I first moved here, and I love horses. I think horses are super cool, but as far as what they provide, other than the fun factor, I don't have horses here because they just eat up all your time and all your money and your resources. And so horses are terrible, terrible, terrible animal to have on a farm that you're trying to be successful at, unless you are a horse farm and you breed horses, do therapeutic riding, you board horses, etc. Then all those things are conducive to you being a horse farmer. So then get horses. But if you're just homesteader and you don't really do any of those things, horses will eat up every last bit of money and time that you have. So I really appreciate you watching. I hope this has been helpful, and I'm telling you all these things with the utmost sincerity and hopes that you will succeed as a farmer, as a homesteader, and read books. Okay, I'm gonna leave you with this parting thought: read books. Okay, talk to you next time. Thank you.